Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Upgrade 2018 Movie Review. Upgrade is a 2018 cyberpunk action thriller film written and directed by Leigh Whannell, and starring Logan Marshall Green, Betty Gabriel, and Harrison Gilbertson. Upgrade follows a technophobe who is implanted with a chip that allows him to control his body after a mugging left him paralyzed. The film was produced by Jason Blum, under his Blumhouse Productions banner. After premiering on March 10, 2018 at South by Southwest, Upgrade was released on June 1, 2018 in the United States by OTL Releasing and Blumhouse Tilt, and on June 14 in Australia. The film made $17 million on a $3 million budget and received positive reviews from critics, who called it one part The $6 Million Man, one part Death Wish revenge fantasy, and praised its dark humor and action sequences. In 2046, Gray Trace, an auto mechanic, lives with his wife Asha, who works for Cobalt, one of the companies contributing to human-computer augmentations. Gray asks Asha to help him return a refurbished car to his client Aaron Keane, a renowned tech innovator. While visiting his home, Aaron reveals his latest creation, a chip called STEM that can manage a human's motor functions. Returning home, Gray and Asha's self-driving car malfunctions and crashes. Four men kill Asha and shoot Gray in the neck, severing his spinal cord. Gray returns home months later as a wheelchair-using quadriplegic, under the care of his mother, Pamela. Asha's death and the inability of Dead Cortez to identify their attackers causes Gray to sink into depression. After a suicide attempt, he is visited by Aaron, who convinces him to accept a STEM implant. Gray regains control of his limbs and Aaron has Gray sign a non-disclosure agreement, requiring Gray to pretend to still be paralyzed. While looking through a drone video feed of his wife's murder, Gray hears STEM speak in his mind. STEM says it can help Gray get revenge and quickly identifies one of the assailants, Cirque Brantner, from the video. Gray breaks into Cirque's home and finds proof Cirque was upgraded through a secret military experiment, also connecting Cirque to a local bar called the Old Bones. Cirque arrives and attacks Gray, but STEM convinces Gray to temporarily give up control of his body, allowing STEM to turn Gray into a lethally efficient fighting machine, killing Cirque with little effort. Cortez later sees drone footage of Gray's wheelchair approaching Cirque's house, but his perceived paralysis negates him as a suspect. Aaron has tracked STEM's movements and berates Gray for his vigilantism. Gray reveals STEM is speaking to him, which surprises Aaron, who demands that Gray stop his investigation. Gray proceeds to the Old Bones and finds Tolan, another of the assailants. Gray allows STEM to torture Tolan to death, first getting the name of the assailant's ringleader, Fisk. Leaving the bar, Gray stumbles, and STEM informs him that Aaron is attempting to shut them down remotely. STEM directs Gray to a nearby hacker, Jamie, who manages to remove STEM's input guard, then leaves just as Fisk arrives. Gray, with STEM's control restored, kills Fisk's companion. Gray returns home only for Pamela to see him walking, forcing him to reveal STEM's existence. Cortez arrives to interrogate them after finding Gray's wheelchair suspiciously abandoned at the Old Bones. She leaves after planting a listening device on Gray's jacket. Gray wishes to give up the hunt, but STEM explains that Fisk will track them down and kill them. STEM reveals that the hack gives it free control of Gray's body. STEM uses Gray to drive to Fisk, causing an automated car to malfunction and crash into Cortez, who is tailing them. Cortez returns to Gray's home, where Pamela explains STEM. Gray and STEM find Fisk, who reveals he was only hired to paralyze Gray so he could be implanted. Fisk's own upgrades outpace Gray's movements. Gray taunts Fisk with the death of Cirque, his brother, allowing STEM to gain the upper hand and kill Fisk. Fisk's phone reveals messages from Aaron, suggesting he orchestrated all the events. Gray storms Aaron's home, killing all personnel in his path, but is held at gunpoint by Cortez before he can kill Aaron. Aaron confesses how STEM forced him to do its bidding, having long since come to dominate all aspects of Aaron's life in pursuit of its goal to become human. Stem kills Aaron and attempts to kill Cortez, but Gray fights for control over his own body, managing to stab himself in the hand. Gray wakes up in a hospital room, not paralyzed. Asha explains he has been unconscious for 2 days following their crash. In reality, Gray is still in Aaron's home. Stem, in full control, explains to Cortez that the psychological strain has finally broken Gray's mind. This was Stem's objective all along, as this allowed Stem to assume control over Gray's mind and body. Gray's consciousness believes the idyllic dream state it has found, while Stem kills Cortez and leaves. The film was originally titled Stem. Whannell wrote the first draft at least 6 years before making the film. According to Whannell, the film was inspired by films such as RoboCop, Total Recall, and The Terminator. Principal photography on the film began in March 2017 in Whannell's hometown of Melbourne. The chase scene taking place on the southern section of the Craigieburn Bypass Hume Freeway, M31, goes the opposite direction to what would have been normal traffic flow to appear that it was filmed in a left-hand drive country. Editing took place in Sydney. Logan Marshall Green based Gray's movement while under Stem's control on that of the character Zenyatta in the video game Overwatch. Cinematographer Stefan Duccio shot the film with Arri Alexa XT and Alexa Mini cameras and Panavision C and E series anamorphic lenses. The unusual camera work during the fight scenes was achieved by attaching a phone to Marshall Green and having the Alexa Mini track the gyroscope of the phone. After premiering on March 10, 2018 at South by Southwest and winning the Midnighters Award, the film was released on June 1 in the United States, and June 14 in Australia by Blumhouse Tilt. In the United States and Canada, Upgrade was released on June 1, 2018, alongside Adrift and Action Point, and was projected to gross around $3 million from 1,457 theaters in its opening weekend. It ended up debuting slightly above estimates with $4.6 million and finished 6th at the box office. It was the second best opening for a BH film, after The Darkness $4.95 million in 2016. It made $2.2 million in its second weekend, finishing 9th. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 88% based on 193 reviews, with an average rating of 7.3/10. The website's critical consensus reads, like its augmented protagonist, Upgrade's old-fashioned innards get a high-tech boost, one made even more powerful thanks to sharp humor and a solidly well-told story. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 67 out of 100, based on 33 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by Post-Track gave the film a 78% overall positive score and a 46% definite recommend. In the Sunday Times, UK, Ed Potton muses, apart from a few flimsy special effects, this is a satire that cleaves dangerously close to reality at times. Emily Yoshida, writing for New York Magazine's blog Vulture, said, a great and grimy little screw-turner of sci-fi schlock, the kind that they truly don't make anymore, the kind that would make Carpenter and Cameron proud. In a less positive review, Charles Bramesco of The Guardian said, while Whannell wrestles with warring desires to fret over the techno-oblivion we're hurtling towards or have a laugh about it, that conflict manifests in a disappointing tonal clash that robs the film of the low-rent fun it could be having. Leigh Whannell explained that the film was written as a standalone film without any expectations of a sequel. Based on pre-release tracking, Whannell said a sequel was unlikely. On August 16, 2018, producer Jason Blum said he had plans for a potential sequel. In February 2020, Leigh Whannell expressed enthusiasm for making a follow-up, saying, "I loved making that film, so I'd love to do it with a bit more money." Blum restated that he would love an Upgrade sequel and that although there were no immediate plans, it was something on both of their minds. In May 2020, it was reported that the sequel was being reworked into a television series, with Whannell, in addition to directing the series, would co-create the series alongside Tim Walsh, who will serve as showrunner, and both men will serve as executive producers. Blumhouse Television is set to produce the series alongside Universal Cable Productions, who have set up a writer's room. The plot of the series is that it is set a few years after the events of the film, with an evolved version of STEM and new host, with the government using STEM as a way to curb criminal activity. Upgrade, an irresistibly gory science fiction melodrama, is B-movie schlock done right. The film follows pseudo-everyman mechanic Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green, whose body and wife are destroyed by upwardly mobile cyborgs with a god complex. No, really. From this plot synopsis, you might think that writer/director Leigh Whannell has a lot to say about man's relationship with technology. You'd be wrong, since Whannell, writer/co-creator of Insidious and Saw, doesn't have the patience to develop any of his film's bigger ideas about how modern technology uses its creators more than we use it. Thankfully, viewers with a hearty stomach and a taste for blood will be delighted to learn that Whannell delivers other things in abundance, like sickening violence, a Dr. Frankenstein-like computer scientist, a bar that's decorated with as many bones, human and animal, as Leatherface's den in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and a mystery subplot whose clues are all instantly ferreted out by STEM, Simon Maiden, a devil-on-your-shoulder version of Kid from Knight Rider who lives inside Gray's post-accident head. You'll have a good time with Upgrade if you don't take Whannell's half-baked ideas or unabashed bloodlust too seriously. Upgrade begins by tacking on a sci-fi gloss to an otherwise paint-by-numbers revenge story. Gray and his wife Asha, Melanie Vallejo, are ambushed by the above-mentioned cyborgs while their self-driving car delivers them to their seemingly fully computerized home. Gray and Asha's car is hacked and destroyed during an unexpected stopover in the Poverty Row suburb where Gray grew up. He and Asha don't notice something's up because they're too busy making out in the backseat. But Gray's house is just as plush and stylistically confusing as the pseudo-basic man cave that their car is driving them away from, the subterranean lair of pouty super scientist Aaron, Harrison Gilbertson, whose futuristic man cave's foundation is built out of concrete, granite, wood and glass, but is also filled with the same softly hissing automated doors, voice command activated appliances, and touch screen tabletops as Gray and Asha's house. The rich do live differently in Upgrade, but Gray is tentatively identified as an outsider since he works with his hands and has a manly, face-assimilating beard that reduces his facial expressions to a gaping mouth and bulging Muppet-sized eyes. Gray's superficial man-of-the-people vibe ingratiates him to Aaron, a creepy loner genius whose vibe is essentially the soul of Colin Clive in Frankenstein but in the body of a bad James Dean lookalike. So Aaron offers to help Gray after evil cyborgs kill Asha, not a spoiler, it happens early on, and turn Gray into a quadriplegic. Aaron will implant a radical computer chip named STEM inside his Gray's body, thereby helping the crippled mechanic regain control over his body's basic motor functions. Unfortunately for Gray, Aaron doesn't immediately describe some of STEM's key features, including his sentience. STEM talks to Gray with a dispassionate robo-voice, like HAL 9000's low-budget understudy, HAL 350, and his ability to commandeer and even boost Gray's control over his body, whenever Gray gives STEM permission to do so. STEM naturally uses these superhuman abilities to help Gray find his wife's killers. It's tempting to compare Gray to RoboCop, another amoral killing machine struggling for his mortal soul, but Gray's personality isn't submerged inside his body the way that Peter Weller's hapless ghost in the machine was in Paul Verhoeven's satirical 1987 Bloodbath. Gray actively encourages STEM to do whatever he needs to in order to first protect their shared body, and then further his own vengeance-fueled investigation. Any pretensions of humanistic cyber commentary that Whannell and his film may have are undermined by the scene where Gray commands STEM to use his body to disarm a group of pub-dwelling thugs after they drag Gray into a bullet case and urine-littered bathroom. Gray gives STEM the go-ahead to mercilessly cut up one thug's face off camera. Gray also tells STEM to stop twice, but he doesn't object too strenuously once STEM's victim gives Gray whatever answers he desires. If you take the scene seriously, you might conclude that Whannell thinks that technology has finally proven what the military could not, Torture is good because it's effective. Your suspicion would only be further proven correct by the way that Gray never pauses to reflect on his penchant for remorseless robo-enhanced murder. But again, Upgrade is not that kind of picture, nor does it need to be. Whannell's mashup of a man vs technology narrative with a revenge-fueled whodunit is as fun as it is because its chase scenes involve sadistic, artificially intelligent computers, nanotech bacteria, and Cronenberg-like handguns, i.e., there are literally guns in some people's hands. Marshall Green sails across the screen, doing somersaults, karate parries, and even Michael Jackson's 45-degree angle lean while he cleaves Bada's jaws in two and slash or shoots their brains out. And through it all, murder mystery clues are doled out with reckless abandon while supporting characters, like Gray's mom, Linda Cropper, and the suspicious detective, Betty Gabriel, assigned to his wife's case, come and go without much rhyme or reason. The key to enjoying Upgrade is relishing its over-the-top characterizations, plot twists, and cheesiness. Upgrade may not be a capital G good film, but it can be a very enjoyable one. For me, Australian filmmaker Leigh Whannell is one of the best screenwriters out there. He has been involved in the writing of two fantastic horror originals, Saw, 2004, and Insidious, 2010. Furthermore, he has written and directed a brilliant sci-fi horror B-movie in Upgrade. He is a great writer because he brings conceptual invention with strong style and tight economy. What he shows is that you don't need billions of dollars to make an entertaining film but rather a decent script with focused ideas and great twists at the end. I watched his latest film Upgrade, 2018, at a Fright Fest 2018 preview, and its blend of science fiction, body horror, and bloody gore was lapped up by the packed crowd. The director, Leigh Whannell, did a Q&A afterwards and spoke of his desire to evoke the spirit of the 1980s low-budget films like The Terminator, 1984, and he certainly achieved that in my view. His budget of $5 million was stretched by incentives from the Australian government, and what it lacks in scale, the movie more than makes up in a look and style which echoes that of those 1980s sci-fi classics. Upgrade's story is very simple and similar in some ways to Death Wish, 1974, and also the recent assassin shoot-'em-up actioner John Wick, 2014. But the joy is not so much in the plot but in the exceptionally well-devised character arc our hero, Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green, goes through. Left a depressed, suicidal, and a quadriplegic by a vicious robbery, he is given the opportunity to revitalize his body by a computer genius, Aaron Keane, Harrison Gilbertson. Hell-bent on finding the killers of his wife, he agrees to surgery which will implant an artificially intelligent program into his body and enable him to walk again. After which the story moves at some pace as he first comes to terms with the new technology, before his descent into the criminal underworld really gathers speed. STEM itself is a fine supporting character too. There is much humor in Logan Marshall Green's performance and his interaction with the HAL 9000-like computer in his head. Marshall Green also excels physically during the brutal and fantastically choreographed fight scenes. Indeed, the bloody violence is a joy, and I actually wanted more gore, as less definitely was not more. But, overall, this is a fantastically enjoyable B-movie mash-up with an incredible look for such a low-budget film. Shadow, fluorescent light, darkness, blood, metal, and strobes all commingle to startling effect. The score by Jed Palmer is a brooding classic, and some of the technological concepts relating to bionic and nanotechnology were very inventive. Above all else, it's Whannell's lean and mean machine of a script that wins the day. He certainly deserves to work on a bigger scale, no doubt. Director Leigh Whannell's Upgrade, 2018, is a cautionary tale as old as sci-fi itself. This is a gritty take on some well-worn territory but neatly splices together common tropes of the sci-fi and action genres. With stylish execution, these pieces you've certainly seen before are fused together into something new. Hybridization is not just a part of Upgrade's genre blending but is also a recurring theme in the film. Futuristic tech is embedded into all surroundings in the world of Upgrade, From touch-screen panels on kitchen tabletops to AI-imbued cars and aerial police drones monitoring crime from the skies. A car crash followed by a brutal mugging result in protagonist Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green, being left a quadriplegic and witnessing the murder of his wife, Melanie Vallejo. Only by infusing his own body with an AI called STEM, Simon Maiden, is he able to overcome his condition and even gain some huge physical perks in the process. He uses his new advancements to seek bloody revenge on those responsible for the death of his wife. Upgrade truly surges to life through its kinetic action sequences, where the whimsical camera work is a thrill to watch. Logan Marshall Green does a solid job all round in portraying Gray, and despite having no specific scene-stealing moments, it is in these brawl scenes where he excels. When things turn violent, Gray surrenders control of his body movements to his AI ally STEM, who conducts some pretty merciless takedowns on his enemies. Here, Green performs these calculated and surgical attacks through his limbs as STEM, whilst also reacting with sheer horror at these actions as Gray. I didn't know whether to laugh or recoil, so I did a bit of both. This is a film knows what it wants, just as well as its protagonist does. I wouldn't blame you for expecting this type of story to deal with themes like humanity. Maybe you'd expect to see Gray coming to terms with what he has become whilst trying to hold on to who he was before his mechanical rebirth. Instead, this story bypasses conventions like this and stays streamlined, with laser focus on the Gray's grisly mission. There is no time for big questions when there are people to pursue and vendettas to fulfill. Although, that's not to say the film doesn't take a breather or two. In fact, there are actually plenty throughout the 100-minute runtime. It's just that these slower scenes can be pretty hollow. They don't do much to serve the characters or story beyond just paving the way for the next action sequence through exposition. This leaves such segments feeling like the bland vegetables you have to finish before you can start dessert. The drop in enjoyability in these slower intervals may have you spending much of the film waiting for the next amazing throwdown. This really shouldn't be the case in a world that seems this interesting, at least on the surface level that we are shown. The simple structure of Upgrade is also a double-edged sword. Underserved by this are the characters and the intriguingly dingy world that they inhabit. We understand Gray's motives but don't know the character too well by the time the credits roll. Even more underserved are the supporting cast. Betty Gabriel ably plays the steely detective Cortez, out to pull the plug on Gray's vengeful crusade. However, the character is given little more than the role of the textbook good cop. Likewise, reclusive young innovator Aaron Keene, Harrison Gilbertson, is the Dr. Frankenstein behind Gray's monstrous augmentation. Yet, despite having unclear motives that allude to there being much more to the character than we're first shown, Keene is reduced to an exposition dispenser by the climax. It is definitely interesting to see a grittier take on a futuristic world that is a lot bleaker than what we're used to. Beyond the shiny skyscrapers is a seedier underbelly with a dark and eerie atmosphere. Unfortunately, not much is done to teach us anything about this world. Besides the fact that Aaron Keene's company Vessel Computers has played a big role in the tech advancements, much of the surrounding backstory is left to our imagination. Though this world isn't quite fully fleshed out, it is the grim mood created that gives it a stamp of identity. This is all anchored by a tense original score composed by Jed Palmer that does a great job capturing the unnerving feel of this world. The final track of this score, titled A Better Place, from the film's conclusion is the standout, with or without the memorable final scene that accompanies it. While the eye-popping action is the main attraction here, the serviceable yet shallow other components may not be enough to make this a must-watch. However, this high-octane manhunt is a good time and a fun popcorn flick. Gray Trace, an auto mechanic, lives with his wife Asha, who works for Cobalt, one of the companies contributing to human-computer augmentations. Gray asks Asha to help him return a refurbished car to his client Aaron Keene, a renowned tech innovator. While visiting his home, Aaron reveals his latest creation, a chip called STEM that can manage a human's motor functions. Returning home, Gray and Asha's self-driving car malfunctions and crashes. 4 men kill Asha and shoot Gray in the neck, severing his spinal cord. Gray returns home months later as a wheelchair-using quadriplegic, under the care of his mother, Pamela. Ash's death and the inability of dead Cortez to identify their attackers causes Gray to sink into depression. After a suicide attempt, he is visited by Aaron, who convinces him to accept a stem implant. Gray regains control of his limbs and Aaron has Gray sign a non-disclosure agreement, requiring Gray to pretend to still be paralyzed. While looking through a drone video feed of his wife's murder, Gray hears Stem speak in his mind. Stem says it can help Gray get revenge and quickly identifies one of the assailants, Cirque Brantner, from the video. Gray breaks into Cirque's home and finds proof Cirque was upgraded through a secret military experiment, also connecting Cirque to a local bar called the Old Bones. Cirque arrives and attacks Gray, but Stem convinces Gray to temporarily give up control of his body, allowing Stem to turn Gray into a lethally efficient fighting machine, killing Cirque with little effort. Cortez later sees drone footage of Gray's wheelchair approaching Cirque's house, but his paralysis negates him as a suspect. Aaron has tracked Stem's movements and berates Gray for his vigilantism. Gray reveals Stem is speaking to him, which appears to surprise Aaron. Aaron demands that Gray stop his investigation. Gray proceeds to the Old Bones and finds Tolan, another of the assailants. Gray allows Stem to torture Tolan to get the name of the assailant's ringleader, Fisk. Leaving the bar, Gray stumbles, and Stem informs him that Aaron is attempting to shut them down remotely. Stem directs Gray to a nearby hacker, Jamie, who manages to remove Stem's input guard, then leaves just as Fisk and a companion arrives. Gray, with Stem's control restored, kills Fisk's companion. Gray returns home only for Pamela to see him walking, forcing him to reveal Stem's existence. Cortez arrives to interrogate them after finding Gray's wheelchair suspiciously abandoned at the Old Bones. She leaves after planting a listening device on Gray's jacket. Gray wishes to give up the hunt, but Stem explains that if they do then Fisk will track them down and kill them. Stem reveals that the hack now allows it to control Gray's body even without Gray's permission. Stem uses Gray to drive to Fisk, causing an automated car to malfunction and crash into Cortez, who is tailing them. Cortez returns to Gray's home, where Pamela explains Stem. Gray and Stem find Fisk, who reveals that Gray's wife was not the main target. Rather, Fisk was hired to paralyze Gray so he could be implanted. Fisk's own upgrades outpace Gray's Stem-controlled movements. But when Gray taunts Fisk with the death of Cirque, his brother, Fisk reacts emotionally, allowing Stem to gain the upper hand and kill Fisk. Fisk's phone reveals messages from Aaron, suggesting he'd orchestrated all the events. Gray storms Aaron's home, killing all personnel in his path, but is held at gunpoint by Cortez before he can kill Aaron. Aaron confesses how Stem forced him to do its bidding, having long since come to dominate all aspects of Aaron's life in pursuit of its goal to become human. Stem kills Aaron and attempts to kill Cortez, but Gray fights for control over his own body, managing to shoot himself. Gray wakes up in a hospital room, not paralyzed. Asha explains he has been unconscious for 2 days following their crash. In reality, Gray is still in Aaron's home. Stem, in full control, explains to Cortez that the psychological strain has finally broken Gray's mind. This was Stem's objective all along, as this allowed Stem to assume control over Gray's mind and body. Gray's consciousness believes the idyllic dream state it has found, while Stem kills Cortez and leaves. Damn, this is going to be one hell of a cult movie as time goes on. Upgrade is relentless action on top of an amazing sci-fi world that is built up masterfully without needing to explain anything. You simply accept this future as plausible. Considering this was fairly low budget, I am surprised the filmmakers were this ambitious with their vision and succeeded quite admirably. Although parts of the story feel like a collage of things we've seen before, these plot elements come together in an original way. The acting is good, the music is amazing, and the story is captivating. My only gripes come from the ending and how that affects parts of the story leading up to it. To briefly cover the plot, we have the main character, Gray, as a hands-on kinda guy in a future where things are increasingly automated. Gray and his wife get into a car accident that is followed up by Gray's wife being murdered and Gray shot in the neck, left a quadriplegic. I especially like the presentation of Gray's misery under this life. It endears the audience to Gray and you want to see him get justice. Aaron, a kind of eccentric genius and seemingly billionaire CEO or whatever, was a costumer of Gray and feels inclined to help Gray become whole again. Applying an advanced microchip implant, with accompanying AI, named STEM, Gray is able to not only gain all mobility but the AI can enhance every physical ability beyond the normal human limit. With a computer in his head and superhuman abilities, Gray tracks down the men that killed his wife and seeks revenge. What makes things more interesting is that these guys are ex-military that have had cybernetic augmentations of their own, which includes guns embedded in their arms among other things. The fights are fun and there is some crazy camera work at hand along with commendable fight choreography. However, Upgrade isn't just a mindless action movie, the sci-fi aspects are given considerable attention and the film takes on an emotional tone as it goes on. The partner relationship between Gray and STEM is interesting as well as seeing how deep this futuristic world goes. It's worth mentioning that the filmmakers definitely included elements that could open up room for a sequel, with the villains apparently having a little more going on outside the film's peripheral, as well as a hacker hinting at a bigger picture and the tech companies having ulterior motives. These subplots are by no means a distraction though. Anyway, by the end, we, of course, learn a few twists regarding Aaron's assistants, why Gray and his wife were targeted, and the true purpose of STEM. In fact, I would say the movie transitions into sci-fi/horror in the last 10 minutes. I won't completely spoil the ending since I want people to go out and see this movie. As for my problems with the film, the most glaring issues concern how the story comes full circle. I do love when writers do that, but it doesn't completely work. I did like the hints to STEM creating a virtual world for Gray subtly with those alleged dreams that Gray says felt too real. Likewise, I did notice Aaron wearing the earpiece. I just figured that was supposed to be their world's cell phone. Unfortunately, STEM running the company all along and wanting Gray is too far-fetched and impractical for an AI to scheme. Plus, it's implied that Aaron and Gray only met a handful of times. It's just too much of a stretch. In fact, making Aaron and Gray have such a minor relationship was a misstep. It would have been better if Aaron felt like he owed Gray something or admired him in a way. Furthermore, Aaron only having a couple goons to protect him was nonsensical since he's supposed to be extremely rich and powerful. I could really spend a lot of time nitpicking the ending and how Aaron being a pawn and STEM controlling the company makes little sense, but I don't want it to sound like the ending is bad, because it's pretty damn good and scary at the same time. All things considered, Upgrade is one of the most impressive low-budget movies I've ever watched. The filmmakers accomplished so much and were able to do things with their world building that huge studio films can't come close to creating. Everything from the simplistic set designs and eerie music enhances the film's tone and establishes a believable possible future. Gray is one of the best everyman characters I've seen in a long while, and I was fully in support of his revenge. I'd love to see this material continue in a sequel where we can get more context to those subplots and hopefully see Gray return. I'd highly recommend this movie with the mere caveat that not everything fully adds up by the end, which kind of hurts the overall presentation. In the near future, screens and machines seamlessly integrate into, well, everything. Smart cars, smart homes, smart drones, smart people. Rare is the human, at least, humans on the upper end of the economic spectrum, who doesn't have some sort of cybernetic upgrade. Gray's an analog man in a digital world. He spends his days working on old cars, restoring them for well-heeled customers. Gray doesn't like computers. Doesn't trust them. Doesn't want to have anything to do with them. Gray's wife, Asha, doesn't get it. She mocks his mechanical obsession, as Gray tinkers with a black '77 Pontiac Trans Am. He's delivering that particular carbureted masterpiece to a young tech titan named Aaron. And when he and Asha drop the car off for him, Aaron introduces them to his latest invention, STEM. Despite STEM's diminutive size, it appears to be little more than a microchip. Really, Aaron says STEM can accomplish almost anything better than humans can. It's a new, better brain, Aaron brags. I look at that thing and see 10 guys in the unemployment line, Gray retorts. He has no interest in widgets that, he says, can take down the world. He has no interest, that is, until his wife's self-driving car crashes on the way home. And instead of police or fire trucks or an ambulance arriving on the scene, they're soon greeted by a gang of murderous thugs. Their leader coolly dispatches Asha with a single gunshot to the chest. As for Gray, he's left for dead after being shot in the neck. Gray survives, albeit as a quadriplegic adjusting to a new life. He once spent his days working with his hands. Now a voice-activated robotic assistant serves Gray's every need, its steel hands replacing the human ones that don't work anymore. Gray mourns the loss of his wife, his mobility, his dexterity. But most of all, Gray longs for justice. And that's something the investigator working his case, a woman named Cortez, seems unlikely to give him. Then Aaron shows up again with an offer. STEM, he promises, can bridge the gap between brain and limbs. It can restore the life that's been taken from Gray, Aaron insists. Gray's not interested. Here's the thing, kid, I'm not looking to restart my life. I'm looking for the off switch. Computers can't bring Asha back, Gray, Aaron counters. But they just might be able to bring you back. What would she want? So Gray relents, agreeing to let Aaron's doctors install STEM in his spine. It does everything that Aaron had promised, and much, much more. In many ways, Gray's a pretty stand-up guy. He loves his wife. He works hard. He's content devoting himself to his old-school mechanical passions. And once Asha is murdered, he understandably wants to see her killers held to account. He tells Cortez that he'll do anything he can to aid the investigation, though he's quick to admit that he probably won't be much help, given his disability. Cortez, for her part, is a determined, conscientious investigator, even though her meager leads on the case don't take her very far. As Gray adjusts to his life as a quadriplegic, his mother, Pam, does her best to help him. STEM, it turns out, is indeed a miraculous upgrade to Gray's broken body. But the technology installed in his neck does far more than merely restore his physical mobility. STEM is actually an artificially intelligent personality that speaks to Gray, telling him what he should do in certain situations and giving him access to a wealth of information he never would have known. Someone could potentially see those abilities as benefits, up to a point. The movie critiques, however, how we often use this technology, especially in the extreme case of STEM's fusion into Gray's body, mind, and will. We've become conditioned, societally, to embrace new forms of technological communication and enhancements. An upgrade is almost always seen as a good thing. But by the time the credits roll, the film asks us to consider whether our increasingly immersive dependence on technology really is a good thing. It also ponders the addictive nature of virtual reality, twice commenting on the powerful draw of an immersive VR world by saying, "A fake world is a lot less painful than a real one." The film suggests, and none too subtly, that technological advances meant to help us may in fact make us unhealthily dependent upon them. So much so that it becomes harder to discern who's really in control, the humans or the AI technology the characters here have created. Gray pays a hacker in cash, currency she's apparently never seen before. She looks at a bill quizzically and says, "They really do say God on them." Asha wears a cleavage-revealing blouse. Gray jokes about taking her pants off. She and Gray begin to make out in a self-driving car, apparently with the intent of going further than that, when the car begins behaving erratically. Early in the film, we see Gray and Asha's accident, which sends Gray colliding throughout the car's cabin. They crawl out, only to find a gang of thugs descending upon them. Ash is shot in the chest, we see her bloody wound, while Gray's shot in the neck, which is also a gory mess. While Gray is still paralyzed, he apparently tries to commit suicide by asking his robot helper to repeatedly dose him with pain medication. He tries to deceive the robot by saying failed, then asks for another injection. But the robot can't be outsmarted and understands that Gray is actually giving the machine instructions that will lead to an intentional overdose. Aaron's offer to help Gray leads to surgery on his neck. We see the scalpel slice into his flesh, glimpse a bit of the surgical procedure in which doctors install the stem chip in Gray's spinal cord, then, cringe alert, watch them staple the lengthy incision shut. Stem does much more than just give Gray his mobility back. If Gray grants permission, Stem takes over his body's movements completely, essentially turning Gray into a robot-like killing machine. Gray, under Stem's control, does some nasty things to the men who killed his wife. One is beaten, stabbed, has glass broken against his face before having his cheek sliced horrifically open. Another gore-filled scene involves a bad's head being blown off with a gun. Some of the men Gray squares off against have had guns cybernetically installed in their arms, and we see one of them loading ammunition into his bicep. A bad guy's existence ends when his head gets shoved onto a spike of glass. A man is tortured, we don't see it happening, but we see the results and hear the victim's screams, with his face being lacerated repeatedly with a knife. The man soon dies from blood loss. Another character takes a mortal knife blow to the side of his face. Several people are shot and killed with guns, including some gruesome headshots. Several melees involve fast-paced martial arts, with hits and kicks brutally knocking people around. One person chokes to death. A thuggish guy repeatedly sticks a knife into various parts of Gray's body to see if he can feel anything. A lengthy, reckless car chase ends with an accident that bloodies one driver's head. Someone stabbed in the hand with a knife, which stays stuck in that hand for quite some time. Though Gray initially wants revenge, he's horrified that Stem essentially takes over and begins to murder people. Characters drink beer and hard liquor. One scene takes place in a grimy bar where most patrons are drinking and bottles are visible behind the bar. Stem warns Gray that his drinking will impair his ability to walk. Stem also wonders why humans choose to consume a substance that debilitates their motor skills. We see a bottle of what seems to be prescription medication. Gray repeatedly lies to Cortez about the murders he's committed. Other characters act deceptively as well. Two scenes picture Gray vomiting. Upgrade feels like a strange hybrid, which I suppose is apropos here of several similar stories we've seen over the decades. It starts out feeling a bit like a really gruesome version of the $6 Million Man or RoboCop. Then things take a decidedly Death Wish-style turn into extreme vengeance, with a heaping helping of Blade Runner lobbed in, too. By the end, artificial intelligence morphs from being a boon to a bane, and it's impossible not to recall films and TV shows with similar storylines. The Terminator, The Matrix, Ex Machina, Westworld, and of course 2001, A Space Odyssey, what with its duplicitous robot HAL 9000, all come to mind. It's no accident that Stem sports a pleasant, helpful persona and voice. He's here to help, after all. To make life better. A lot like Siri and Alexa, only with the ability to confer ninja skills, too. Only too late do Stem's creator and recipient realize that this artificially intelligent technological wonder might actually be more intelligent, as in, having a mind of its own than anyone realizes. That's the point here. Ceding every aspect of our lives to technology's influence and control could eventually lead us to some very bad places. Then again, Upgrade leads viewers to some very nasty places itself, as it bloodily rams home its legitimate cautionary message. One of the best movie-going experiences is going to a movie knowing little to nothing about it and being completely floored. There was word of mouth about Upgrade, and beyond the basic elevator pitch of John Wick meets RoboCop, I knew zero about it. Luckily it was playing at one of the theaters in my area and I decided to check it out. I should have known I was in good hands the minute the Blumhouse Productions banner came on the screen. From the very beginning it was unique. Instead of opening titles popping up on screen, the opening titles spoken and shown through sound waves. It seemed to throw the audience off balance, and it makes Upgrade that much more effective. The story is simple but contains incredible world building, and some really fascinating ideas. The John Wick/RoboCop description is apt, but this movie also contains elements of Blade Runner and Heart of Steel from Batman, the animated series. Upgrade takes place in the near future. Society is plugged in at all times. There are self-driving cars, smart homes, and law enforcement relies on drones to the point where they can remotely identify people based on the fillings in their teeth. Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green, isn't a fan. He's an analog guy stuck in a digital world. He is a proud Luddite and technophobe. He is one of the many workers who essentially became obsolete once society underwent full automation. His only source of income revolves around restoring classic cars, but only has one client, the tech billionaire Aaron Harrison Gilbertson. Gray's wife Asha works at a tech company that specializes in robotic limbs for soldiers. He convinces her to go with him to drop off Aaron's latest car. Aaron is an enigmatic figure. He's almost a robot because he so rarely leaves his underground compound. He shows them a new chip he's working on called STEM, which would be embedded in a person and unlocks their potential. Gray of course is unimpressed because he sees another way in which the worker will get replaced. On their way home their self-driving car goes berserk and they're in an accident. Before help can arrive they're confronted by a group of thugs that kill Asha and paralyze Gray. Gray is a quadriplegic and has given up on life, and Detective Cortez, Betty Gabriel, can't make any breakthroughs on finding out who killed Asha. Aaron offers Gray the chance to rebuild his life by implanting STEM into his system. Gray reluctantly accepts and it allows him to walk again. STEM, voice of Simon Maiden, begins speaking to Gray and helps him begin his quest for revenge. Logan Marshall Green is impressive here. The film asks him to play several different gears. He transitions from gruff everyman, to John McClane level smart ass, to a Jackie Chan style reluctant ass kicker, and play a grieving widower. Marshall Green weaves through these different modes effortlessly and often in the same scene. When he starts to understand what STEM is capable of, he tries to process it all as best he can, and the further the film goes along the more he becomes full of regret. The film could have easily made Gray become Charles Bronson in Death Wish, but its narrow focus to tracking down his wife's killers keep the film from embracing the uglier aspects of vigilante films. Simon Maiden's voiceover work is outstanding. He channels both Paul Bettany's Jarvis in Iron Man and HAL 9000 from 2001, A Space Odyssey. When STEM is shown being planted into Gray it looks like a tick. STEM becomes more and more parasitic and drains Gray both physically and emotionally. The fight scenes are well choreographed and filmed. They are all close combat style and their intensity is felt. The audience had a visceral reactions to it in a way that the vast majority of action films don't elicit. Upgrade has a vision of the future that isn't dystopic but more in line with how society might actually function. There is no city or year defined, but it feels as though it's in the near future. The police have constant drones on patrol, citizens have ID chips in their fillings, and the self-driving cars look like a more evolved form of a Prius. The smart houses seem like something Amazon or Google would one day produce. Yet, it doesn't go full Blade Runner neon cityscape and instead looks like an urban area infused with more technology. There are still pockets of the city that are dirty and dangerous. The criminals that attack Gray have guns implanted in their bodies. The crack houses of this world are places where people pay money to be plugged into a VR world because, as a hacker tells Gray, it's less painful than the real world. There are areas where technology doesn't exist, such as the Old Bones bar that Gray visits to pursue a lead. This scene is smart both because it leads to a gruesome set piece but also because it shows the limits of STEM and Gray. The scene is also lit to show the moral dilemma Gray is experiencing but also the divide between where Gray ends and STEM begins. The film also has a lot to say about society's reliance on technology. The criminals have weapons and processors embedded in their bodies. They see themselves as above humans and their own species that can sneeze and have nanobots kill someone through breathing. Humans are shown outsourcing all sorts of technology. The smart house can print pizza, the cars are self-driving, and in Gray's case, revenge is even being outsourced to a machine. The dangers this represents are well documented here. The only two analog figures in this movie are Gray and Detective Cortez. She suspects Gray even when her advanced technology clears Gray, yet her gut does not. Her police car is devoid of hackable computers and she routinely visits Gray despite police not doing their work face to face anymore. It's telling that she becomes the hero of the film the further Gray succumbs to STEM. The ending is both a great twist and one that exists in conversation of ex machina, which also the evolution of technology and what happens the more sentient they become. Writer-director Leigh Whannell crafts a film that straddles the line between Paul Verhoeven-style satire and Alex Garland meditation on technology, all while working on a Blumhouse budget. He is an in-house talent, having been a writer on The Insidious, where he directed the third film, and Saw films. He has clearly learned how to craft action scenes from his collaborations with James Wan. Upgrade is a low-budget action film that feels much bigger because the world building is incredible while being a narrowly focused narrative has a lot to say. Upgrade has finally been released in Canada, so I had to see it ASAP as it's been one of my most anticipated movies of this year. Did it live up to those lofty expectations? For the most part, yes. It is certainly one of the most entertaining action moves of the year with some quality kills, but it's not quite as action-packed as I would have liked. It takes a little while for things to kick into gear, but at no point is it ever boring. Logan Marshall Green is fantastic as Gray, a man left paralyzed after a mugging where his wife is killed. When Gray is offered an AI implant called STEM, his life is transformed as he has an all-new particular set of skills which will help him track down and kill the men who murdered his wife. But is there more to STEM than meets the eye? Upgrade is beautifully shot with a wonderful use of colors demonstrating the light and dark sides of Gray. As other reviews have said, it does feel like classic Verhoeven with some cheeky black humor, and the violence is pure cartoon stuff, so it's never particularly disturbing. I had an idea in my head about where the story was going and who was responsible for Gray's wife's death, but it pleasingly didn't go as expected and was definitely open for a sequel. The action scenes and fights are superlative and manage to give us something unique that we haven't seen before. Marshall Green fights like he is genuinely being controlled by someone else, and that must have been tough to learn. It could have looked silly, but instead it was 100% badass and the audience was cheering at various points. I see this becoming a cult classic, and watching it at midnight with like-minded fans would be an absolute riot. Upgrade successfully mixes genres with elements of horror, sci-fi, and action with a cool music score too, which will be making its way to my iPod this evening. Overall, Upgrade is a massively entertaining sci-fi actioner with Logan Marshall Green on career best form and some quality scenes of graphic, but cartoony, violence. Upgrade is a compact sci-fi action B-movie that wants to be a hip little genre exercise but doesn't have the chops, or maybe it's just the imagination, to entirely pull it off. The film isn't a dud, it delivers the goods in a certain reductive, baseline action fanboy way. Yet Upgrade is the sort of movie that thinks it's more ingenious than it is, starting with the premise, which is a semi-catchy, semi-stupid in a way that the movie couldn't have completely intended. In a future landscape that looks a lot like today, except for the occasional advanced gizmo doodad, i.e., what the filmmakers had the budget for, an analog junkie named Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green. How old school is he? So old school that he refurbishes 70s Pontiacs and listens to Howlin' Wolf on vinyl, is riding with his corporate breadwinner wife, Asha, Melanie Vallejo, in their driverless luxury vehicle that resembles a speeding metal honeycomb. When the car crashes, they're ambushed by a pack of muggers who murder Asha and brutally wound Gray, who wakes up to learn that he is now a quadriplegic. For about the next 20 minutes of screen time, he of course turns into a miserable druggy wretch with nothing to live for. But Aaron Keane, Harrison Gilbertson, a young robot limb entrepreneur with the sleek hair, steely eyes, and fascist space cadet demeanor of an actor ordered up by a studio executive who said, "Get me a Jared Leto type," offers to make Gray the subject of a bold experiment in rejuvenation, like the $6 million man meets the decimated hero of RoboCop. A device called STEM, which resembles a small metal roach, is surgically implanted in Gray's spinal column. It's a computer that reconnects his mind to his body, and also fuses with his body, so that Gray can become an invincible fighting machine, his limbs controlled by programming, at least, when he wants them to be, and the voice of STEM talking directly to him, inside his skull, in tones of gentle resolve that are clearly designed to remind you of Hal from 2001, A Space Odyssey, though he sounds like a Hal who just graduated from a Tony Robbins seminar. Upgrade doesn't try and pretend that it isn't a derivative thriller. The writer-director, Leigh Whannell, a key member of the Saw and Insidious franchise teams, though this is only the second feature he's directed, after Insidious 3, would probably be perfectly happy if you watched his movie and name-checked all the influences he's vacuumed into it, from The Hidden to Ex Machina to The Terminator. But here's the hoot factor. When Gray is up and fighting, his limbs punching and chopping with relentlessly engineered precision, he's supposed to be an astounding fantasy being, a human with a lethal weapons system inside him, a computer that's at once his comrade and his enemy. But the pummeler we see is no different, really, than 1,000 action heroes, from Jason Bourne to whoever Jason Statham is playing on VOD this week, who never make a wrong move and always defeat each foe with slashing invincibility. That Gray has a computer consciousness guiding his every action isn't so much spectacular as redundant. The fact that he stands ramrod straight, and that each of his moves is mathematically designed to be the most efficient one possible at that moment, goes back to an even earlier model of hand-to-hand combat perfection, the martial arts genre. All we're watching, really, is Bruce Lee on autopilot. At one point, Gray does something a bit Saw-like, breaking someone's jaw by stretching it open until it's a leering rictus. I might have welcomed more of that, since it's at least colorful. Mostly, though, the unintentional joke of this parable of transformative body horror is that it's just a routine ninja movie decorated with stray futurist trappings. STEM the computer is more than a shadow killer. He also helps Gray rerun footage of the fatal mugging and zero in on clues that let him track down his wife's killers. But couldn't Gray have used an ordinary computer to do that? Who cares if it's in his head? As a vengeful action film, Upgrade is perfectly acceptable fodder. There's a hint of video game consciousness at work in its image of an old-fashioned hero who Logan Marshall Green makes sympathetic, if not all that distinctive, committing violence by learning to wield his own body as a kind of murderous avatar. But the film doesn't develop or explore any of this, it's just sort of there. Kind of like that voice in your head that says, "Look, another kick-ass killing. Cool. Exciting. Next." 3 years after acquitting himself well enough from the director's chair with Insidious Chapter 3, Aussie writer/director Leigh Whannell mines far loftier sci-fi subject matter in his sophomore authorial affair Upgrade, formerly titled STEM, an absorbingly anarchic if tonally uneven, low-tech high-concept meditation on the perils of ever-pervasive technology. While Whannell may be bitten off more themes than can be cogently plumbed in the span of 95 minutes, he can't quite reconcile the vastly differing poles of dark humor and stern sci-fi gravity. The import may suffer, but the overall entertainment level never really does. This, in spite of some pacing problems to boot, is due to a topically cool conceit, barbarous stints of smarting violence, and a consistently engaging lead performance from Logan Marshall Green. Sure, it may come off as a harried hybridized of her and Harkery Henry, but so what? Every upgrade stems from somewhere. We pick up in an unnamed city in the future, where AI and automation rule the day. Driverless cars, smart homes, ubiquitous touch screens on every household surface, you name it. Gray Trace, Marshall Green, an open Luddite who proudly works with his hands as a mechanic, lives with his professional techie wife Asha, Melanie Vallejo, in sterilely cold contraption of modern technology. You know the type. After Gray and Ash visit her tech genius rival Aaron, Harrison Gilbertson, head of the Vessel Corporation, their driverless car skids off-road and crashes. Asha is pulled out of the car and shot dead in front of Gray. Insult to injury, Gray is savagely stabbed in the spine and left paralyzed from the neck down. Now in a suicidal funk, Gray is left to live a soulless existence where machinery performs everyday menial tasks for him, making protein smoothies, administering medicine, etc. It's either that or pulling the plug. That is, until Aaron approaches Gray with a chance to undergo an upgrade. Aaron implants Gray with STEM, a new better brain, which not only restores motor function in all 4 of Gray's limbs, the operating system begins directly communicating with its host as well. Gray is not only upgraded physically, he's overhauled mentally, and the moral murk found between STEM's ill will and Gray's good intent is what fascinatingly drives the narrative drama in the film. At first, STEM, voiced by Simon Maiden, can only help Gray with permission. Gray obliges when the super-intelligent bot spots a clue in the video footage of Ash's murder and offers help in locating the culprit. Gray must confront his own moral standing as it relates to his wife's killers, as well as the escalating autonomy STEM begins operating with. Gray wants revenge, but that doesn't necessarily mean cold-blood murder. STEM wants survival and self-preservation, but that doesn't necessarily rule out cold-blood murder. As these two loggerheads ram against each other in the third act, a shocking revelation comes into play that feels less like an organically earned plot twist than a kind of needlessly contrived exclamation point. And yet, somehow it all remains engrossing enough. One of the most enjoyable aspects of Upgrade is also one of its most irksome. I admire how Whannell, in stark opposition to the glossy techno-milieu of the futuristic cityscape, depicts the combative violence in such a gritty, low-tech manner. There's something wild and kind of contrapuntally punk to seeing a supercharged cyborg rely less on fancy gadgetry and more on old-fashioned fisticuffs. By the same token, this tactile approach is at times so clunky in its execution, sped up, too robotic, herky-jerky, that it almost comes off as a lame and laughable chop-socky film. Perhaps this is a byproduct of underfunded FX, but there's at times a level of misplaced humor in the action, which aligns with some of the inconsistent one-liners and stabs at dark humor that fail to reverberate the overriding tone of sci-fi seriousness. This tends to sap the weight of the movie's intended importance. Thankfully, the same lo-fi approach to the fight scenes are applied to the death sequences, and the eruptions of unremitting graphic carnage help allay some of the pacing issues and disharmonic tenors. Not entirely, but just enough to keep you involved. Another crucial element to keeping Upgrade a lively watch, despite the overall movie feeling a bit too small-scale and slight of spectacle by cinematic sci-fi standards, is the captivating turn by Logan Marshall Green. He gives Gray a quiet charisma, with a gruff exterior, hulking frame, and deep voice that plays as a much welcome balance point against the diametrically opposed high-tech world he finds himself in. We obligingly ride with Gray through his dissociative surroundings, whether he's confined to a wheelchair and left only to emote from the neck up, or whether his technologically made-over physique allows him to physically dominate his foes. Marshall Green plays both ends of the spectrum with the same level of credence, which carries the narrative a long way, even when some of the aforementioned problem areas pop up. With an inferior performance, Upgrade's shortcomings would be far more unforgivably glaring. Fortunately for us, Marshall Green is able to mask some of the blemishes. All in all, Upgrade is by no means a substantial sci-fi game changer, or even all that inventive of a genre-bending rule breaker. It's a slight, lowercase stint of cinematic science fiction, whose promising premise is almost undone by the unevenly struck tones, awkward action, and unstuck twist landing. Still, due to its subversive spirit, topical poignancy, vicious lashes of violence, and well-guided performance by Logan Marshall Green, the proceedings remain amusing enough. Like we all endure on our mobile phones every week, a minor upgrade can't hurt too much, a super high-concept sci-fi thriller that plays like a feature-length Black Mirror episode written by a Philip K. Dick fan and directed in the style of a 90s actioner. Upgrade could be one of the most energetic and purely likable movies of the summer. It's ridiculous, that's a given. And unfortunately it relies heavily on premise over plot or characterization. But that shouldn't stop audiences having an absolute blast in a movie packed with action set pieces, cool future tech and a decent amount of gore to boot. Set in a near-future dystopia, Logan Marshall Green stars as Gray Trace, a car mechanic with an inherent mistrust of the tech that has taken over the world. Most cars are now driverless, a large chunk of police work is done remotely via drones, and a handful of young geniuses are developing such advanced gadgets that the human workforce could become obsolete anytime soon. In a terrible bit of irony, a horrible accident leaves Gray paralyzed. Now the highly advanced flip invented by precocious entrepreneur Aaron Keane, Harrison Gilbertson, is the only thing that can give Gray back his freedom and his life. And for better or worse, it gives him a whole lot more on top. Though the trailer gives a strong sense of where the first half of the movie is heading, if you can avoid it you'll be treated to the joy of one of the funniest, coolest, most surprising action sequences of the summer, as Gray finally understands the capabilities of STEM, the implant that's allowed him to walk again. A little bit Matrix, a little bit John Wick, with a big chunk of sci-fi fabulous. Absolute kudos should go to Marshall Green and director Leigh Whannell for pulling it off. Whannell is probably best known for his collaborations with James Wan, co-writing and starring in Saw and its sequels, and Insidious. Whannell directed Insidious Part 3. With Upgrade, Whannell has stepped out of James Wan's shadow and come into his own, proving himself a distinctive and talented action director. The choreography of Upgrade is glorious and Marshall Green handles it with style. There are plenty of clever twists and turns in the narrative. Upgrade is a satisfying and complete vignette that we suspect will hold up to multiple viewings even after its secrets are revealed. Why only 3 stars then? The problem with Upgrade is that the setup and concept are so strong that what actually happens is both repetitive and predictable, making the second half of the film bizarrely boring for a movie this pacey and action-packed. Instead, Upgrade plays like a video game movie, where Gray has to use his skills to defeat a series of baddies one after the other. Upgrade is also guilty of playing to some very familiar tropes, no spoilers, and because it fits into a fairly well-tread subgenre, fear of technology and AI's taking over, it feels at times like a bit of a mash-up of several other things. Entertaining and stylish but somewhat throwaway, the dialogue is often expositional and functional, and the characterization flimsy. The new Blade Runner this is not. Still, for fans of films like The Guest, The Purge, and The Matrix who enjoy a healthy bit of fear, Upgrade is excellent fun. And the world of Upgrade is perfectly suited to a sequel, too. We wouldn't be surprised if Leigh Whannell got his very own franchise at last. For a summer bereft of big hitters, in a cinematic era saturated with multi-million-dollar comic book films and ever-growing expanded universes, original, fun, and slightly silly B-movies like Upgrade and The Meg feel like a welcome palate cleanser, back-to-basics entertainment running under 2 hours, which require no prior knowledge and not much mental or emotional investment. Upgrade's fear of a homogenist and dehumanist society is a message which works as a metaphor for the movie, too. If the MCU and its ilk are the super slick successful equivalent of cinematic AI's, then Upgrade is the human and flawed alternative. Rough around the edges, yes, but somehow more charming for it. At some point in a near future a man called Gray fixes cars, and then after an attack needs fixed himself. In the same solid B-movie revenge tradition as Mandy and the same solid B-movie Faustian bargain tradition as Venom is Upgrade. In It's not quite certain when, which is some distance from now but recognizably in reach, there is a place that looks at once like a city in Australia trying not to be, and what a future imagined by people who have seen The Matrix would and does look like. There is also a magic robot that lives in a computer chip, but we'll get to that. This is a second feature as director for Leigh Whannell, who also writes, something audiences will be more familiar with as he's responsible for the earlier outings in the Saw family as well as the Insidious series. Though I've seen Insidious, I can recall almost no details of it save that it sufficiently slid past my critical distance that I woke my partner with a fit of night terrors. I can't quite place what element of it roused the primate nestled in my subconscious to wake and hoot in fear, but a subtler sinister shadow is also found in Upgrade. Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green, repairs old muscle cars, an analog contrast to the self-guiding electro-roamer his lawyer wife, Asha Trace, Melanie Vallejo, uses to get around. He delivers one to his latest client, Asha's client too, somewhat reclusive genius squillionaire Aaron Keane, Harrison Gilbertson. Keane is a bit odd, the love child of Justin Bieber and Elon Musk, a fey wizard with a pet cloud and a magic house, one in which he keeps a chip called STEM. I went with the expectation that I'd see some good old-fashioned cyberpunk-inflected kicky punch and was not disappointed. There are good villains. Benedict Hardy's Fisk is demonstration that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. He can near enough kill with a word, but Dune is less a touchstone for this than other works. Early on I was reminded of a quote from a William Gibson novel, and in that act of remembering effectively uncovered what was to be a later twist, so shall spare you sight of it. Later I was minded to swear at the screen because it seems to play with such a basic and annoying trope of fantastic fiction that my primal urges were as quickly stirred as that nocturnal yelp. In the middle I was properly entertained. There's a particular unity of camera and actor movement that's good enough that they use it in the trailer and more than once in the film, and that trick of standing up is pretty neat. There's nothing especially new, but it's well executed, and that sense of fatality and a number of pretty visceral horror, and body horror, elements permeate. It's not without issues. Ash's death is a motivating factor, and though there's a female detective, Betty Gabriel, investigating the attack, and subsequent revenges, there are bits of gender balance that still worry. There's a hacker whose railing against binary conventions is perhaps as discomfiting as L337 asking for equal rights, and that's before we add the business of torture, of outsourcing violence, of Turing tests and devilish details. Upgrade isn't for everyone. If nothing else, it's basically just an enhanced version of an older story, but as revenge sagas go, it's smooth running, well constructed, and pulls a lot of options out of a few simple choices. If you're at all inclined, don't skip it. Upgrade is a movie about a man who looks like Tom Hardy who becomes incredibly violent and skilled at fighting thanks to a symbiotic add-on embedded inside him. He can talk out loud to the implant's voice, and he's the only one who can hear it. With its help, the Tom Hardy type is able to easily defeat a bevy of anonymous alley thugs and their ilk, though he's plagued with the suspicion that the implant may not be entirely moral. In the film, written and directed by Saw co-creator Leigh Whannell, the Tom Hardy type is Logan Marshall Green. In the upcoming movie Venom, which shares an almost identical plot, the Tom Hardy type is Tom Hardy. It's unfair to criticize Upgrade for sharing a similar logline to another upcoming movie with a similar looking star that can be chalked up to poor timing or unlucky casting. And so, instead, let's criticize Upgrade for also sharing a logline with about a dozen other movies and television shows. Might I point you to Deadpool 2, which, spoiler alert, follows a suicidal man with enhanced fighting abilities trying to get revenge after the death of his wife. That's not to say a movie is necessarily bad for treading on well-worn territory, but Upgrade does little else. There was probably, in one draft, a theme or central idea that this movie was attempting to convey, but the thesis must have long ago been lost to the tsunami of clunky dialogue. The characters repeatedly refer to each other as husband and wife, so the audience understands they are, in fact, husband and wife, and a generic futuristic aesthetic. Discussing plot holes feels like a bit of a waste of space. You know exactly what you're getting with this movie. What does it matter, say, if Gray, Marshall Green, is delivered case files from the police officer tasked with solving his ex-wife's murder, as if civilians are routinely enlisted in detective work? Does it matter that the same police officer can identify Gray via the city's ubiquitous drone cameras outside a suspect's house but somehow not see him stand up from his wheelchair and walk, which he does on the street in plain view? Will the average viewer roll their eyes at the fact that neither the police nor Gray notice that the thugs who shot him weren't using conventional guns, but weapons implanted in their arms? Does it matter that Gray doesn't think to report this incredibly relevant information to the police? The fight scenes in which the symbiote in which the STEM chip takes over Gray's motor functions are well shot and fun, but in addition to action sequences, we also get about 3 moments of explicit gore, all of which are shown in the trailer, that serve no purpose but to make the audience wince in a movie that otherwise presents itself as a sci-fi thriller. Perhaps it was force of habit on Whannell's part after working on so many Saw movies. That tonal whiplash is perhaps best embodied in a scene in which a villain, a fellow upgraded human like our hero, enters an off-the-grid biker bar and kills the bartender by sneezing at him, with tiny knives in his mucus particles. This is not played for laughs. Upgrade ends with a twist so obvious that the only way you'll be surprised is if you've suffered your own recent chip implant that has wiped your memory of every movie you've ever seen. As a movie, it's the cinematic equivalent of Paint by Numbers, competent, attractive even, but take a single step closer and the lines peek through. There's no need to pay money to go see Upgrade. If you select it on a plane and sleep through 60% of it, you've seen it in its entirety. Upgrade is a knockout blend of sci-fi, horror, and action. A seemingly simple premise leads to an intriguing foray into the evolution of man and the use of artificial intelligence. It's a heady turn in the bloodbath. Upgrade is spectacularly violent, but not torture porn. There's a method to the brutality. The world depicted is not that far away. I wish the mystery element were more refined. A minor drawback, but it prevents Upgrade from reaching loftier heights. Upgrade takes place in the near future. Logan Marshall Green stars as Gray Trace, an old-fashioned grease monkey surrounded by advanced technology. He spurns high-tech, but his beautiful wife, Melanie Vallejo, embraces it. She has a self-driving car and 3D prints dinner, instead of old-fashioned cooking. Their home is a wonder of automation. Gray's life changes dramatically after delivering a muscle car to a reclusive inventor, Harrison Gilbertson. A savage attack destroys his idyllic world, leaving him paralyzed and bitter. He watches helplessly as the lead detective, Gabriel, struggles to find answers. Gray gets a top-secret chance to be healed. A cutting-edge processor, STEM, can bridge the divide between his mind and body. The results are miraculous, but with an unexpected side effect. STEM gives Gray the ability to move his body with mechanical precision. He has been upgraded as a human. Gray enters this new frontier with one objective: revenge. Upgrade can be analyzed on multiple levels. As a science fiction film, it is extraordinary. The future is both wondrous and frightening. Automated homes, cars, police drones, technology is helpful and efficient. It's even more amazing when the medical possibilities are explored. But this is when the lines blur into something dark and sinister. Gray's use of STEM, and the similarly upgraded villains he faces, portray the horrific potential. A gun embedded in your arm is far deadlier. Close your eyes as your body exacts machine-like murder. At what point does humanity give up control to artificial intelligence? The scenario is all too real. Upgrade has hardcore, ass-kicking action scenes. They are brilliantly shot by Whannell and cinematographer, Stefan Duccio. Gray's movements, when using STEM, are clearly puppet-like. They succeed in showing what a machine can do in control of the human body. To be clear, this isn't Terminator or Cyborgs run amok. Gray's Upgrade is entirely believable in context of this story. Whannell's script posits a realistic future. All present signs point to these advancements being achieved. Upgrade is a warning about the consequences. Repairing paralysis will be welcomed. But that level of biological manipulation can spurn horrific outcomes. A mystery lies at the center of Gray's attack. The character, with the help of STEM, seeks the truth mercilessly. The big reveal is expected. The clues are dropped like lead weights. It's not entirely obvious, but I was able to deduce where the plot was going quickly. Upgrade flies by with a 95 runtime. The film will keep you glued to the screen. Whannell had leeway to bulk up the story elements. Another 10 minutes of exposition would have added dramatic heft. I understand the reasoning. Upgrade is produced by Jason Blum and Neon under the BH banner. Blum is the king of micro-budget horror. He aims for short and sweet. Upgrade fits that mold, but could have surpassed it. The plot, execution, and tremendous entertainment value warranted more screen time. Upgrade is a must-see. It straddles several genres successfully. The violence isn't for the squeamish, but does fit the story. Upgrade delves into the philosophical conundrum of artificial intelligence. It shows how unchecked technology advances with dangerous intent. Leigh Whannell delivers his best film since Saw. The latest Blumhouse production is a lean, playfully trashy sci-fi riff on its usual B-movies and its best and bloodiest in some time. In a dystopian future that specifically evokes 80s horrors such as Videodrome, RoboCop, and The Terminator, technophobe Grey, Logan Marshall Green, is a record-collecting, muscle car mechanic out for vengeance after his wife, Asha, Melanie Vallejo, is killed by her car in an accident that also leaves him a quadriplegic. Former client and baby-faced evil genius Aaron Keane, Harrison Gilbertson, suggests that for the small price of a non-disclosure agreement, Grey trial his latest invention, STEM, a cockroach-shaped implant and feat of biomechanical fusion that would allow him to move his limbs once more. The catch is that once inside Grey's brain, STEM begins talking to him, making useful suggestions and strategies for tracking down Asha's killers and, with permission, taking over his body in combat, his arms and legs cracking, snapping and slapping mechanically, made even more visceral by lurching, metallic sound effects. There's a goofiness to the proceedings that allows the film to become a kind of buddy movie. STEM, he has a knife, yelps Grey, only for STEM to riposte calmly, we have a knife, too, and the moments of genuinely squirm-inducing body horror make a change from the anomia that can sabotage movies determined to capture a younger audience. I had written Marshall Green off as a budget Tom Hardy. It's true that the two look uncannily similar, but his performance here is agile and interesting. He plays into, not against, the ridiculousness of the material. It's still a small, silly movie and there's nothing particularly novel or even of the moment about its technoseptic stance on machines, but as a genre exercise, it's a fun ride. Ostensibly emerging out of nowhere, 2018's Upgrade is one of the biggest film-going surprises of the year, an old-school, dark, noirish sci-fi action thriller reminiscent of The Terminator and RoboCop. Upgrade was written and directed by Australian filmmaker Leigh Whannell, who knows a thing or two about genre pieces after scripting both Saw and Insidious, among other titles. Flying solo without frequent collaborator James Wan as a producer, Whannell acquits himself admirably here, elevating what is essentially a B-movie into A-grade territory. More or less an Australian movie with Blumhouse backing, this is precisely the type of inventive, smart, brutally violent, darkly humorous, and high-concept picture that John Carpenter would have created in the 1980s. In fact, it feels like a movie you would discover on a well-worn VHS cassette hiding at the back of a video rental store back in the day. If somebody spearheads a VHS release, I want it. Set in an unspecified near future, Grey, Logan Marshall Green, is a stay-at-home mechanic who fixes classic cars to sell to rich collectors, and prefers a more hands-on, old-school lifestyle in the face of advanced, ubiquitous technology. After visiting eccentric, tech-savvy client Aaron, Harrison Gilbertson, one night, Grey and his wife Asha, Melanie Vallejo, are ambushed and attacked by a group of cybernetically enhanced criminals, which leaves Asha dead and Grey paralyzed from the neck down. Faced with a life relying on computers and technology, with no ability to use his hands, Grey falls into a heavy depression. However, Aaron presents him with the opportunity to gain back full use of his body via an illegal experimental operation to attach an artificial implant known as STEM, voiced by Simon Maiden, to his spine. Cured of his paralysis but sworn to secrecy, Gray begins his own investigation into the men responsible for his condition, using his AI-augmented body to kill them one by one. For the majority of its runtime, Upgrade plays out like a high-concept Death Wish reimagining, but Whannell has a few tricks up his sleeve. Twists and turns emerge out of the chaos, leading to a daring, jaw-dropping climax which recontextualizes the narrative, catapulting Upgrade above the ordinary. Admittedly, the narrative ingredients are standard order, including a police detective, Betty Gabriel, who suspects that Gray knows more about the sudden murders than he lets on, but that's ostensibly the point. Upgrade is a postmodern subversion of the hackneyed revenge fantasy formula, permeated with a relevant message relating to the dangers of automation. In addition, the meticulous world building further bolsters the material, with Whannell painting a plausible picture of our future. The world of Upgrade is undeniably our own, but peppered with unobtrusive instances of speculative future technology. Lower socioeconomic areas exist in this vision of the future, while characters still use simpler items like tape recorders. Rather than feeling artificial or deliberately designed, this world feels lived in and believable, and all on a tiny budget produced in Australia for a reported cost of under $5 million. Upgrade's technical specs are far better than expected, shrewdly using every last cent out of the budget to create a flick that looks at least 4 or 5 times more expensive. This is only Whannell's second directorial outing, but he displays the confidence of a seasoned veteran. Who would have thought that the director of 2015's paint-by-numbers Insidious, Chapter 3 would be capable of such a pronounced sense of cinematic style and personality? No matter the scene or environment, Whannell maintains a confident pace and his mise-en-scene is frequently smooth, while discrete digital effects serve to enhance the practical sets. Additionally, Marshall Green nails the role of Gray, perfectly portraying the script's intense dramatics as well as handling the intricate physicality the part requires. Stem's movements look subtly mechanical, from the smallest hand gestures to the precise fight choreography, easily selling the illusion with seemingly little effort. He even convincingly pulls off the scenes during which he talks to Stem, moments that were at risk of looking ridiculous. An adept supporting cast surrounds Marshall Green, with Maiden making a particularly positive impression as the voice of Stem. Elsewhere, the likes of Gilbertson, Need for Speed, Gabriel, Get Out, and Benedict Hardy, Hacksaw Ridge, hit their marks effectively. Even Clayton Jacobson, director of Canny, shows up in a minor role. Upgrade packs a punch during its visceral action beats, miraculously able to create a fresh look through specific fight choreography and inventive camera techniques, evoking the type of sheer elation that the first John Wick inspired back in 2014. This flick is a hard R, exhibiting a level of violence usually reserved for torture porn movies, but there is also wise tact to the gory money shots, which is a testament to Whannell's well-judged direction. Furthermore, Stefan Dussio's digital cinematography is slick and assured, astutely using neon lighting to emphasize the retro vibe, making Upgrade look closer to a European art house flick helmed by Nicholas Winding Refn. It is a bit of a shame that Upgrade was not shot on film stock considering the pedigree, but that's neither here nor there. Accompanying the visuals is a throwback synth score by Jed Palmer which adds mood and atmosphere, in addition to subtly accentuating the feeling of excitement during the adrenaline-pumping action sequences. A few short moments of obvious CGI blood do appear, but the special effects throughout the feature otherwise impress, particularly the convincing futuristic cityscapes. It's mind-blowing to consider that Upgrade was created for less money than so many nasty, straight-to-video cheappies that flood the bargain bin on a seemingly weekly basis. Upgrade is superlative masculine entertainment, a throwback action thriller which exceeds all reasonable expectations to become one of 2018's best and most essential movies. Aside from the palpable Death Wish influence, the feature is essentially Alex Garland, think Ex Machina, meets Nicholas Winding Refn with a hint of Black Mirror, and it will appeal to those who enjoy 80s and 90s genre pictures. In the face of so many expensive summer blockbuster spectacles, It's refreshing to witness this type of counter-programming that's committed to delivering more with less. It's just a nasty good time. If Upgrade was directed by, and starred a black man in the lead role, it would be receiving accolades and Oscar talks like the studiously mediocre Get Out. Director Leigh Whannell's Upgrade, 2018, is a cautionary tale as old as sci-fi itself. This is a gritty take on some well-worn territory but neatly splices together common tropes of the sci-fi and action genres. With stylish execution, these pieces you've certainly seen before are fused together into something new. Hybridization is not just a part of Upgrade's genre blending but is also a recurring theme in the film. Futuristic tech is embedded into all surroundings in the world of Upgrade, from touchscreen panels on kitchen tabletops to AI-imbued cars and aerial police drones monitoring crime from the skies. A car crash followed by a brutal mugging result in protagonist Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green, being left a quadriplegic and witnessing the murder of his wife, Melanie Vallejo. Only by infusing his own body with an AI called STEM, Simon Maiden, is he able to overcome his condition and even gain some huge physical perks in the process. He uses his new advancements to seek bloody revenge on those responsible for the death of his wife. Upgrade truly surges to life through its kinetic action sequences, where the whimsical camera work is a thrill to watch. Logan Marshall Green does a solid job all round in portraying Gray, and despite having no specific scene-stealing moments, it is in these brawl scenes where he excels. When things turn violent, Gray surrenders control of his body movements to his AI ally STEM, who conducts some pretty merciless takedowns on his enemies. Here, Green performs these calculated and surgical attacks through his limbs as STEM, whilst also reacting with sheer horror at these actions as Gray. I didn't know whether to laugh or recoil, so I did a bit of both. This is a film knows what it wants, just as well as its protagonist does. I wouldn't blame you for expecting this type of story to deal with themes like humanity. Maybe you'd expect to see Gray coming to terms with what he has become whilst trying to hold on to who he was before his mechanical rebirth. Instead, this story bypasses conventions like this and stays streamlined, with laser focus on the Gray's grisly mission. There is no time for big questions when there are people to pursue and vendettas to fulfill. Although, that's not to say the film doesn't take a breather or two. In fact, there are actually plenty throughout the 100-minute runtime. It's just that these slower scenes can be pretty hollow. They don't do much to serve the characters or story beyond just paving the way for the next action sequence through exposition. This leaves such segments feeling like the bland vegetables you have to finish before you can start dessert. The drop in enjoyability in these slower intervals may have you spending much of the film waiting for the next amazing throwdown. This really shouldn't be the case in a world that seems this interesting, at least on the surface level that we are shown. Gray, Logan Marshall Green, is an old-school mechanic in a futuristic, high-tech world of cars that drive themselves, smart houses, and criminals packed to the gills with computer hardware and cybernetics. He rebuilds relic gasoline-powered cars for the wealthy elite, like reclusive tech mogul Aaron Harrison Gilbertson. Gray's wife, Asha, Melanie Vallejo, is a high-tech heiress in her own right, working at a company that creatures implants and artificial limbs for injured people. When Gray and Asha hand-deliver a car to Aaron, the young genius shows them his latest creation, STEM, a computer implant that can power anything, even human bodies. As Gray and Asha return home, their smart car malfunctions, resulting in a horrific car accident. A gang of upgraded humans come down on them like vultures, killing Asha and paralyzing Gray. The local police are doing their best to find the men responsible, but don't have enough to go on to find them. Aaron comes to Gray with an opportunity: become the first test subject for STEM. Reluctantly, he agrees and the implant is put directly into his brain stem. It interacts with his brain to give him full mobility once again, as well as heightened reflex, speed, and strength, thanks to the chip activating more muscles than Gray would be able to do himself. One night, while Gray is going over drone footage of the night his wife was killed, STEM talks to him, voiced by Simon Maiden, pointing out details in the footage no human would notice, which leads to the identity of at least one of the men responsible for Ash's death. Only Gray can't go to the police with this info as he signed a gag order about the tech in his body. So Stem convinces him to look into it himself. The combo of Gray and Stem soon become a vigilante fighting force, taking out Ash's killers one by one, a gang led by a more than formidable upgraded human named Fisk, Benedict Hardy. Upgrade is rated R for a very good reason, the violence is gruesome. While I'd heard there was plenty of violence here, it's more quality versus quantity. The violence depicted here is straight out of 1980s favorites like RoboCop or Total Recall, where heads were literally exploding and melting before our eyes. It harkens back to classic action flicks and a time before the American audience member became such wimps over what was acceptable to be shown for the public eye. The story of Upgrade, written and directed by Whannell, Insidious, Saw, isn't super original, as the revenge action thriller is a super popular genre right now with huge money makers like the John Wick series. However, the sci-fi elements and 80s style hardcore violence put this in a league all its own. Plus, it's got some great twists along the way as well to really set it apart. The cinematography, by Stefan Duccio, is truly inspired. There's some unique and interesting camera work throughout the piece that really make Upgrade in a class all its own. You almost need a computer chip embedded in your own brain to pick up on all the cool nuances in the look of this film. Logan Marshall Green looks, moves, and acts like a poor man's Tom Hardy. There were instances where I could have sworn it was Tom Hardy. So much so that I'm curious how I'll feel when the former's Venom hits later this year, as the trailer for the Spider-Man spin-off actually felt like a knockoff of Upgrade's trailer. Still, Marshall Green did a damn good job carrying this film. He has a very expressive face, making me believe at times that he genuinely lost control of his own body. He's that good. Equally great was our villain Benedict Hardy. He doesn't look like your typical bad guy, but he was a completely creepy badass that made me feel sorry for any poor sap who got in his way. The rest of the cast did their jobs well enough, though nobody else really stood out. I was hopeful Betty Gabriel would shine as Detective Cortez, and she did her job, like the other secondaries, well enough. But overall nothing to really declare as a breakout performance. Upgrade is a fun popcorn movie that's tremendously entertaining and tremendously violent, which should please action aficionados and genre fans. It's hardly the most original concept out there, and there are slow moments that dragged a bit, making the otherwise brisk 95 minutes runtime feel longer than it should. Overall, it was a bloody good time, even if it felt more like a Netflix original than a cinematic wide release. Woohoo! This is a crowd pleaser. The gathered audience packed the Le Petit Theater in New Orleans for a much anticipated showing at the Overlook Film Festival. First things first, Upgrade is horror adjacent. It's not a straight-up horror movie. I'd suggest it's 50% action, 40% sci-fi, 10% horror. IMDb lists it as action/comedy/horror and fails to list sci-fi, so take that for what it's worth. That is not to take away the achievement that Whannell has pulled off. Whannell was being awarded as the Overlook Festival's 2018 Visionary Award, which was established to honor a contemporary horror figure or company elevating the genre, while fostering the community by providing opportunities for new talent to thrive. Whannell is best known for his work as an actor and writer in the Saw and Insidious franchises. Upgrade is the second feature film he has directed, after Insidious, The Last Key, which was released earlier this year. After this, I'm guessing we're getting many more. Upgrade is a near-future take on where things may go if we let technology take us there. It's a wonderful thing, and a terrifying idea, a proud trope for science fiction. Automated cars, digitally sensitive everything, and drones fill the sky. Logan Marshall Green is Gray Trace, a man who still prefers to work on old Pontiac Firebirds, a man who trusts his hands more than the technology surrounding him. His wife Asha, Melanie Vallejo, is a cybernetics designer and has a very different take on the role of technology. The two of them are invited to meet with a young technical wunderkind, Aaron, Harrison Gilbertson, who is showing Gray and Asha's STEM, the chip of the future. Gray is dubious about the whole newfangled technology, and as he and Asha are being taken home in their automated car, the car gets overwritten, and the two are hijacked. A gang of thugs, with guns embedded in their arms, surrounds the couple, killing Asha and leaving Gray paralyzed. No explanation, no rationale. But don't worry, we'll get there. Gray is nursed back to health by his mother, and I would like to recognize that in a role that in many movies would be a throwaway supporting role, I really appreciated how Gray's mother is portrayed in this movie. She's there for him, unconditionally. It's a small role, but it's devoid of the cliches of movies like this. There's no arguing or frustrations, just duty and love. He is also supported by a series of robotic arms, Asha's firm's creations, that help him with his medications. And he has a fancy wheelchair. But he's horribly depressed and tries to over-medicate his way into killing himself. In the hospital, he is approached by Aaron, who offers him the use of the STEM chip which will reconnect his severed nervous system, and more. He agrees to the implant, which is super hush-hush, and indeed, there is a remarkable recovery. Gray walks. It's a medical miracle, right? Soon, he determines that the STEM chip can talk to him, and the chip suggests that they go out and get some justice. The cops are also hunting for the answers, but they are moving far too slow for Gray's desires. Gray and STEM eventually are able to identify one of the thugs, and Gray decides to pay him a visit. While searching the thug's apartment for clues, the thug returns home, naturally, and the thug is thoroughly thrashing Gray around the living room when STEM suggests that Gray kicks in the upgrade. There's your title. Enter Gray the Kung Fu killing machine. STEM is doing all the work, and Gray's brain is a witness to mass destruction. Points to Marshall Green for his motions after he gets the STEM chip. His movements are suitably artificial and stiff, and yet lightning quick when necessary. The fight choreography utilized some clever tracking mechanisms, and the flow of the fight scenes are wild, fluid, and comprehensible. Hollywood take note. The remainder of the second and third acts involve Gray trying to find out who his would-be killers are, how to avoid the police finding out about his secret recovery, and most importantly the story asks, who is really in control of Gray's body? It is a fantastic and dynamic trip that Whannell takes us on. The horror comes in the violence. The trailer will give you an idea of how brutal the fights get. Also, there are some dark twists to this film, that convey something sinister going on, and that has a bit of a horror bent, but again, more sci-fi than horror. The audience roared at times, and this will be a movie to see in a packed house, as I do hope it gets the chance to. Start the buzz, people. In his acceptance of the award, he had commented that he was trying to create a movie with the freedom of a low-budget indie picture, but has the production values of a tentpole action movie. He had used Cameron's The Terminator as a template for how he wanted this picture to work, which was a movie that maximized its modest budget to create a real powerhouse of a production. I would suggest that this movie has a strong thematic DNA tied to Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop. Other strong influences seem to be The Matrix, The Raid, and Blade Runner 2049. This is a cyberpunk movie, which is a genre that seems to have disappeared after the 1990s, which may be a testament to the state of our current technology that the idea of plugging a jack into your skull is pointless if you have a good smartphone at your disposal with Wiki on it. William Gibson would be proud. Blumhouse has upped the budget for this film, but in its soul, it is still an indie picture. The exploration of the infusion of technology to the human body is a time-honored trope, and this upgrade is a worthy successor to the top of the sci-fi action fare set in the near future. Technology controls nearly all aspects of life. But when Gray, a self-identified technophobe, has his world turned upside down, his only hope for revenge is an experimental computer chip implant called STEM. Putting a refreshing spin on the classic man-slash-machine dynamic isn't an easy thing to accomplish. Take RoboCop as a prime example. it was remade to fit the current societal and political landscape but fell flat on its face, saying nothing new, and as the worst offense of all, was incredibly tame and boring. Leigh Whannell, one of the co-creators of the Saw franchise and heavily involved with the ongoing Insidious franchise, Upgrade is unafraid to wear the classic 80s science fiction revenge clichés and techno-punk atmosphere on its sleeve, but it also has a modern twist to it in the form of STEM, a new technological device, surgically inserted into the user's body, that can work godly miracles such as giving back a quadriplegic individual the ability to walk. Gray, Logan Marshall Green, a bit too animated and over the top in the role, but also able to sell the improvements to him with both physical excellence and some decent comedic lines commenting on everything from technology to the body horror he indirectly ends up frequently causing, is old school. He prefers present-day vehicles instead of the futuristic automated ones his techie wife uses on her way and back to work. One day while out together delivering a repaired car for one of his only remaining clients, the infrastructure of the digital vehicle is assumed, set off course, and crashed, all essentially leading to the brutal murder of his wife and being left for dead. Like I said, it's a story you're all probably familiar with but feels fresh thanks to STEM, which isn't only used to bring back Gray's mobility. The male-sounding version of Alexa, voiced here by Simon Maiden to great effect at bringing out more humor and a sinister side, working as a cautionary tale against the rise and control of technology, is able to take over Gray's body completely with permission. STEM is essentially the voice in Gray's head that no one is aware of as they communicate verbally, transforming the man into what functions as a hybrid of Batman and Spider-Man in terms of the unparalleled ability to sense incoming attacks and counter them in the most effective way possible. The distinction between Gray and Gray while under control is methodically crafted, giving the body robotic movements and precise command over joints similar to much of the fight choreography in the Matrix franchise. This comes as less of a surprise once you remember that Leigh Whannell actually had a minor role in the series and is no doubt also drawing inspiration from working on that set alongside his own self-professed influences such as The Terminator, all stylishly flavored with swirling camera movements and an edgy hard rock soundtrack that fits with the gnarly brutality from every death on the checklist of generic villains. Luckily, Upgrade tends to jump from one impressively choreographed fight sequence to the next, as unless the narrative is taking a breather to analyze the mental toll that going from able-bodied and married to a quadriplegic failure, there's actually a surprisingly emotional attempt at an intentional drug overdose stopped by computers. The story is as formulaic as it comes from the genre. I don't think there's a single person in the audience that will be unable to spot the big twist from the very beginning of the film, and although the script does seem aware of this by pulling one last swerve on viewers with a darkly appropriate ending, there is almost zero effort put into fleshing out these antagonists or the nefarious companies they operate under. Upgrade zips along like a version of the original Blade Runner on speed. It even has a futuristic detective segment utilizing security camera footage, as the structure is as simple as tracking down each man responsible for the attacks one by one, but honestly, that's all the movie needs. The modern-day twist of STEM is successfully able to refresh all of the tired tropes we have seen in similar experiences now for decades. Gray may be going through an inner struggle that questions whether he is truly in control or not, as he accepts that the very thing he hates, technology, is his only option to independently seek out vengeance. But you have the free will to purchase a ticket for this movie, and you absolutely should. In another summer crowded with big-budget CGI blockbusters, Upgrade opts for practical effects and an 80s retro vibe while finding its own voice. Co-creating Saw and creating Insidious are huge accomplishments for a resume, but Upgrade is the best work of Leigh Whannell's career and deserves to find an audience. I walked into Upgrade not really knowing what to expect. I knew about some chip in some guy's back and the death of his wife, but nothing much else. What I was not expecting was to see a deeply emotional work of art, which does so much with its shoestring budget that I was shocked to see it only cost $5 million to make. It delves into the world of post-humanism that we are rapidly approaching as technology and biology blend together. But with all that at its heart is a story about a man losing everything he loves and trying to live in a world where nothing will bring the love of his life back. So to set the scene, In the not-so-distant future in an unnamed American city we open in on Gray, Logan Marshall Green, a technician that restores old cars for wealthy clients. He grew up in the poor section of the city but escaped that life when he found the love of his life, now wife Asha, Melanie Vallejo, who is an executive for a biorobotics company that helps create prosthetics for wounded soldiers. They live a happy life helped by the fact that Asha earns a lot of money for her job, and Gray is doing what he loves, working with his hands. All of this changes one day after Gray and Asha dropped off a restored car to one of Gray's rich clients, Aaron Harrison Gilbertson. As they were driving back into the city in their automated car, they realized the car was not taking them home. In fact, it is taking them to the rough part of the city where the car is purposely crashed and Gray and Asha are dragged out of the car by a gang of thugs. Soon, even with police drones watching overhead and with help on the way, the gang shoot Asha in the stomach and Gray in the neck. Being instantly paralyzed, Gray can only watch as the life drains from Asha's eyes. 3 months later and Gray is out of hospital but is still a quadriplegic. While he has the technology to live in his house with the help of his mother Pamela, Linda Cropper, he has reached the point of trying to find the off switch, as even though Detective Cortez, Betty Gabriel, is trying, there has been no progress in finding the people that killed Asha. It is here where Aaron finds him and offers him a chance to walk again if he puts his new chip stem into his back. It is a big success and Gray can walk again, but then one day Simon Maiden, talks back. Now the first thing that really sells Upgrade is the acting, which really had to do a lot of the work to sell this premise. Logan Marshall Green had to do this interesting job of both looking terrified in his face as his body acted in a fluid and professional way. It is really hard to sell that disconnect and make it look believable, but Logan just makes it work. I think part of that is the lengths they went to give him character before the chip. Indeed, while it was over quickly, I doubt anyone would not be moved by the time between the crash and the chip where he can only move his neck. As well as this, I liked all the touches that showed that it was a computer program moving his body and not a human. All his movements are fluid but in almost an uncanny valley way, like they move with speed, efficiency, and power, but not in a way that is natural. For example, when he is walking he always turns on right angles rather than the diagonal. All of this comes to a head in the action sequences, which with the help of some great stunt doubles might be some of the best hand-to-hand combat sequences that I have seen so far this year. Though also just a warning that these action scenes go from 0 to 100 real quick, and if you don't like gore then there are a couple of moments you may want to look away. The supporting cast was also really great. Benedict Hardy makes a great villain as Fisk. Harrison Gilbertson is channeling a slightly nervous and reclusive tech titan. Also, it was great to see Linda Cropper here as Gray's mother. It is always great to see one of the Farscape alumni pop up in films. Betty Gabriel really steps up as the other side of the equation, trying to hunt down the people that killed Asha, but also then realizing that she might not be the only one hunting them. I knew I had seen her in something recent and then it clicked that she was in Get Out, see review, our film of the year in 2017. This is such a different role, but once again she shows such an amazing range, and I am shocked that she is not in all the things. Finally, this film shows just how important voice actors are, as the film would not have worked nearly as well if there was not the excellent acting of Simon Maiden there to embody what is just a chip. While the acting is one part, the other is the really creative cinematography that you see throughout the film. You see this mostly in the action sequences when STEM takes over the body of Gray and moves autonomously. The first example of this one you have probably already seen in the trailer, as the camera rises with Gray off the floor, so it feels like you are rising with him. There is also the moment when Gray is shot and the camera does a 360 degrees vertical pan flipping through the sky as Gray's life is forever changed below. These moments elevate the film beyond just being visually interesting because they help bring the idea of what is going on in his body to the forefront visually, and as the saying goes, show don't tell. Add to this, the film has some great set design, creating a world that is far in the future but also believable with what we currently understand about technology, and also, as I mentioned in the opening, it is crazy how much they got out of such a small budget. As well as this, I also have to give credit to the musical score by Jed Palmer that soared when it needed to soar and fell into the background when it needed it to be unobtrusive. Though I will say this is a very loud film, so take caution if you have any hearing issues. Also, just before we end, I want to take a moment to show out some of the themes of the film, and things that we are dealing with at the moment or in the near future, and just a warning that there may be some slight spoilers in this paragraph. You have the rise of automation, and what does that mean for the workforce when all of the jobs become automated? This is happening today and we still do not have a good idea as to what we can do here. Also, the role of augmentation/post-humanism, this is something that has been delved into before in films like Ghost in the Shell, I, Robot, and Blade Runner, and it really works here even if it is just a side part of the narrative. When you break it all down, Upgrade at its heart is a mystery film, where the mystery is who and why did they kill Asha and leave Gray for dead. Without getting too much into the specifics, I was really interested in how it all worked out, and I have to give props to that really ballsy ending. In the end, do we recommend Upgrade? Yes, of course we do. The action is great, the acting is spot on, the story is intriguing, and the production is fantastic. Indeed, I wish more films would take some creative risks like this, and I wish more studios would support those riskier films, and while we are at it, I hope audiences go and see them. Upgrade is one of those films where I kind of think that it would be best to go see it in the cinemas if you can, because I foresee it being one of those cult classics that people talk about for years to come. My initial encounter with Upgrade was a miserable movie-going experience. It was Saturday of South by Southwest 2018 and I was coming down from a healthy beer buzz fueled by plentiful day drinking as well as an open bar party prior to the film's midnight premiere. That inebriation factor is 100% on me. Other external influences were beyond my control. The screening didn't begin on time, which is not at all uncommon at any festival with a million moving parts. Ordinarily, a slight delay wouldn't be a big deal. Except Upgrade also included some poorly planned pre-show hullabaloo featuring Jason Blum in a lab coat emceeing as someone received a live RFID injection. The device injection didn't make much sense as supposed entertainment, and also didn't work, leaving bewildered attendees to wonder, we're starting an hour late for this. Add in the fact that daylight saving time was coming into play and Upgrade was effectively 2 hours behind. Add a post-screening Q&A on top of that, and remember seating began 30 minutes before the originally scheduled start time, and you're looking at incarceration in a cramped theater chair for an unreasonably big block of time. Call me crabby if you want, I won't put up a fight. But festival programmers and presenters ought to take note, if your 90-minute midnight movie doesn't send its audience home until after 4 a.m., that's an issue highly likely to unfavorably salt their moods. It did for me in this circumstance anyway, as I left Upgrade utterly bleary, and perhaps unfairly projected annoyance onto my perception of the movie. I later wrote a rough draft review based on a lot of negative notes. One of those notes was, "I'm bored," possibly written as an unheard plea for rescue. Another scribbled sentence simply said, "This is a disappointment." Ultimately, I didn't publish that coal raking. As much as I'd like to believe I can disassociate environment from experience, I had to consider that hunger, a headache, and tired frustration influenced impartiality, particularly since the movie received praise everywhere else, including winning South by Southwest's Audience Award in the Midnighters category. Home video afforded another swing at Upgrade under more comfortable conditions. In the end, a rating initially scored at 45/100 rose to 65/100, although I'll entertain the possibility that my first viewing left such a bad taste that the score should be higher still. Conversely, assumptive guilt could have primed me too positively for the second spin, and I was actually on point the first time. Who knows? I only offer this anecdotal digression to frame where I'm coming from. Comparing what I wrote after South by Southwest to what I think now, I can say that I was definitely wrong about my initial assessment of lead actor Logan Marshall Green. Marshall Green cemented me as a supporter after his perfectly pitched performance in The Invitation, review here, far and away my favorite film of 2015. So I was surprised to see my notes say, LMG isn't right for this role. A second look suggests my issue came from his character. Gray Trace, a hands-on mechanic, is an analog man unwilling/unable to adapt to a digital world where AI automates everything. He aims to be an everyman hero in a Hitchcockian wrong place, wrong time scenario, yet his setup screams of stale stereotyping not necessarily befitting a throwback action movie. But Logan Marshall Green absolutely electrifies Gray into a flesh and blood being the same way computer implant stem reshapes quadriplegic Gray into a furiously finessed fighting machine. Marshall Green adds countless tiny touches, even into otherwise inconsequential moments, pinching individual scenes with levity, heartbreak, or adrenaline rush shock to always take his dialogue or plot purpose one extra step. Even when Gray doesn't connect, Logan Marshall Green always does, and his charismatic commitment carries up Gray a great distance. Other actors genuinely are odd fits. Harrison Gilbertson plays billionaire tech genius Aaron Keane with such a cracker-dry personality, his awkwardness reads as brainless blandness. And of the four henchmen earning Gray's ire, I don't know why the mousier man in a mustache was cast as the main heavy. The script curiously chooses a video game-like route for progression that isn't entirely intriguing either. Gray basically follows a straight line from one bad guy to the next in pursuit of a twist that can hardly be considered revelatory since all of Gray's paths make stops in identical locations. To be sure, writer/director Leigh Whannell pulls every available trick out of the bag built since his early indie days to stretch Upgrade as far as anyone possibly could. Crisp cinematography combined with alert editing creates bone-cracking physical fights out of straightforward choreography. Lighting crafts a colorful near future where restrictive sets can't. Intelligent filmmakers know how to make technical tools do the heavy lifting, and Whannell employs his extensive experience to give Upgrade a fluid visual sheen. But limited funds still show some seams. For instance, a tame car chase largely looks like what it is, two vehicles repeatedly passing other cars at relatively safe speeds. The film's fans champion its boffo splatter effects and unabashed machismo, recalling a time when Arnold reigned supreme in cinema. Going for an old-school vibe of fists, flipping cars, and a wronged man out for revenge also comes with a cheese factor where it can simultaneously be seen as implausibly silly or contemporarily out of touch. I would argue that Upgrade plays less like a lower-budgeted 1980s Schwarzenegger extravaganza and more like a bigger-budgeted full-moon sci-fi romp. Decide for yourself if that makes the movie sound unappealing or up your alley. Personally, I can see Upgrade from positive and negative viewpoints since I've had both. My current conclusion is that the film hits precisely the notes of stylish violence and minor sci-fi spectacle it sets out to strike. Some of those notes are off-key or out of tune, but that's kind of in keeping with the type of retro madness Upgrade makes a meal out of. Don't take my word on it though. Given how the first two trips went, a third watch might leave me with another take altogether. Synopsis: set in the near future, technology controls nearly all aspects of life. But when Gray, a self-identified technophobe, has his world turned upside down, his only hope for revenge is an experimental computer chip implant called STEM. My take: while one would have thought that following their stint at last year's Academy Awards, thanks to their Oscar-winning film, Get Out, Blumhouse Productions would be motivated towards working on more awards-hungry films, but clearly we had a wrong idea. As their latest film is exactly what brought them fame in the first place, an entertaining stripped-down genre flick with a small budget and a big idea. Helmed by writer/director Leigh Whannell, a major Hollywood player after his long collaboration with James Wan resulted in the Saw and Insidious franchises, who here brings the exact kind of B-film that promises to be a neat potboiler as well as provides enough sci-fi speculation and bone-crunching genre thrills to satisfy our expectations, but different enough to keep us engaged. Recalling 1980s science fiction revenge films like RoboCop, this one too delves into the dark and gritty nuances of superhero films, only this time with revenge on its mind, and yet somehow manages to be so much more, albeit some minor flaws. Set in the near future where driverless cars are elite status symbols and most every human walks around with some sort of digital augmentation device on their body, the story follows Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green, an old-school mechanic, who loves restoring vintage cars and is horrified by everything that's related to high technology. Happily married to Asha, Melanie Vallejo, who runs a robotics firm, his life takes a drastic turn when Asha's fully automated design car malfunctions and crashes in the low-income neighborhood where Gray grew up. But before the paramedics can arrive, a group of unknown assailants shoots them dead without provocation. While Asha dies, Gray survives with a severed spinal cord, leaving him a quadriplegic. However, his latest benefactor, Aaron Keane, Harrison Gilbertson, a billionaire genius prodigy, offers him a solution in the form of his latest invention known as the STEM, an artificially intelligent microchip that functions as a superior brain so the paralyzed Gray can lead a normal life again. Lost and frustrated that case detective Cortez, Betty Gabriel, keeps coming up empty on her leads, Gray accepts Aaron's proposal, and decides to use his newly heightened computational intelligence, which is able to massively expand his capacities for physical and mental response, in order to avenge his wife's murder. And when a situation proves too tough, he lets the AI, voiced by Simon Maiden, take over. What could have been a so-so episode of Black Mirror is delivered with bloody glee by director Whannell, whose premise itself is your basic revenge tale. But what separates the film from falling into the same tropes as the revenge films before it, is the creative use of its sci-fi world, and twists and turns leading into the climax. While the first act does a lot of road place setting, with Gray and Asha woodenly calling each other husband and wife to make sure the audience knows that they're married, the film really picks up steam once Gray gets his new lease on life. The actual beats of the mystery are less important than the dynamic between Gray and STEM, as STEM becomes both the angel and devil on his shoulder, the duo switching between straight man and loose cannon depending on the situation. Being that he's just a mechanic, there's no hidden past with special forces training, STEM becomes a sort of alternate personality. With its host's permission, the AI gains full control of all motor functions, relegating Gray to a submissive viewer like us. This reality leads to some wild scenes with hilarious physical comedy born from the juxtaposition of elite fisticuffs and an equally surprised, disgusted, and helpless face. Gray's relationship with STEM grows ever more complicated in the film's finale, as the two continually negotiate the lengths to which STEM acts for him. Is STEM just doing Gray's bidding, or is Gray's body being hijacked for some higher purpose? The answers are suitably dark, but the film's sheer energy and the strength of its concept do more than enough to elevate this revenge picture into something refreshing and eminently watchable. Give Marshall Green credit because he must separate facial expression from bodily movement, his straight-backed robotic hitch a thing of beauty as he wreaks havoc while begging victims to back down. Here, director and screenwriter Leigh Whannell also conjures a vision of the near future in which technology's pervasive influence has become the norm. We are on the cusp of surpassing the human-machine boundary, ushering in an age of hybridity and cyborgs, thereby deliberately recalling earlier films like The Terminator and the underrated Van Damme vehicle, Cyborg, both aesthetically and conceptually. But it manages to avoid feeling trite or pretentiously retro. This is at least partly because it responds to the late 20th and 21st century fascination with computational technologies and AI in an original fashion. Earlier human-robot hybrid films have often fantasied the physical robot body as the source of spectacle and action. This film, though, reimagines this transformation at an interior, nanotechnological level, focusing on invisible biomechanical and biochemical apparatuses rather than exterior prostheses. Sure, it's got your dime a dozen Blade Runner cyberpunk debris, holograms, drones flying over city streets, but production designer Felicity Abbott infuses these objects with an organic sensibility that furthers the film's thematic intermixing of the natural and artificial. Cars, computer screens, and surgical theaters are studded with honeycomb, and triangular patterns cascade like leaves down car windshields. This feels futuristic in a way we've rarely seen before, especially when contrasted with the down and dirty, modular technology of the criminal underworld. Gray infiltrates in his search for revenge, including palm-implanted guns and razor-sharp nanites. You can sneeze into someone's sinus cavity, ripping them up from the inside. Nevertheless, the film is most entertaining during its action scenes, which are bloody, violent, and ruthless, with an edgy sense of humor. In particular, Gray's banter with Stem is amusing and often witty, lending the film levity and a tone of self-deprecating seriousness. Director Whannell also wisely underplays his hand when it comes to FX, which is a mix of practical and digital. He throws in moments of gore but waits to foist them upon us. Each of Gray's fights when he tracks down his assailants ends in bloody fashion, especially the first one. All are second and third act kills that only happen once the film takes a turn. Stephen Duccio's cinematography is crisply lensed and Andy Canny's editing is ragged and kinetic, and together they make Gray's increasingly gory exploits riveting to behold. However, I personally believe the screenplay could have been more nuanced, and taken more risks to explore and develop its ideas. At its core is an interesting premise, but director Whannell does not do enough to distinguish it or its execution in more unique ways. This tendency also applies to the characters. Unsurprisingly, Marshall Green has the most material to work with in developing Gray, but the rest of the cast and characters end up either having too little to do, Betty Gabriel, or conjuring performances that draw too heavily on well-worn tropes, Harrison Gilbertson. These are lapses, or perhaps more accurately lost opportunities, so that when the narrative arrives at its seemingly inexorable twist, a sense of predictability nevertheless lingers despite the film's visual flair. Thankfully, Marshall Green, being one of the most impressive young actors around, due largely to the high quality of the projects he picks, here he offers yet another commanding and intense lead performance, eschewing the sentimentality that many actors would have brought to the role. On the whole, Upgrade is an action-packed sci-fi horror thriller that's both clever and original enough to thoroughly enjoy. This film, directed by Leigh Whannell, written by Leigh Whannell, produced by Jason Blum, starring Logan Marshall Green, cinematography Stephen Duccio, edited by Andy Canny, music by Jed Palmer, production companies Blumhouse Productions, distributed by OTL Releasing. Release dates March 10, 2018. Running time 100 minutes. Countries United States. Language English. Budget $3 million. Box office $17 million.